Hi everyone and welcome to this August bullet journal plan with me video. If you're new around here, hi, my name is Anna and today we're walking through this soft sunset beach inspired monthly theme. I'm pretty excited about the paintings in this one. I hope you'll love the color palette as much as I do, but without further introductions, let's get started with the first page. So we are starting from a monthly cover page and I decided to go with a bigger painting that I haven't done in a while. This spread will later turn into a small Dutch door section for the monthly calendar, but before we get that far, we'll start with this sunset beach painting itself. I used my fancier watercolor paper today. This is 100% cold pressed cotton. That's amazing for smooth watercolor washes that we'll need for this painting. We're also gonna need a white gouache paint, but otherwise all you need are your watercolors and brushes. I made a very quick pencil sketch here that you can barely see in the video because I tried to keep it very light. But pretty much all you need to mark for yourself is the horizon line, which in my painting is a little bit above the middle. And then I drew out the wave shapes where they meet the sand. You can of course draw some light shapes for the clouds and waves if you like, but I usually find myself not really following them because loose details like that tend to change while painting, so avoiding those extra pencil lines might be a better idea. But now that we have these few lines on the paper, it's time to take out the brushes and watercolors. I'll start today with this medium-sized flat brush and switch to a smaller brush later, and then I'll quickly show you the colors we'll be using for this painting. I'll also try to write the colors I'm using for each part of the painting to the video, so you'll get a little bit better idea of which colors to mix. But we'll start by painting the sky first, and the first step here is to apply a clear layer of water for the whole sky part, which will help the colors to blend very smoothly together. This is called the wet on wet technique, which is just used for very smooth washes like this, where you don't want any harsh lines to appear in the end result. I tried to make a very subtle color gradient here, so the top part has a little bit more blue and then the colors will get more pink and orangey when we reach the horizon line. And if you're wondering if you could do this painting with gouache paints, you definitely can, but I do think that watercolors are a much faster and easier option for specifically a painting like this. You would need to use a hefty amount of paints if you choose to create this with gouache. And also it might take a lot of time to blend the colors together, especially if you want to create a very smooth look. So for those reasons, I would recommend watercolors for this painting, and I also highly recommend you to try this out even if you don't have that much experience with watercolors yet, because this is a very simple one and could even be great as your first landscape painting to try out. But anyway, I wanted to leave the space around the sun almost completely white, so you saw me using a clean, dry brush to kind of remove some of the paints from that area. And after that, we are letting this first layer completely dry, and then we can continue with the clouds. So here we are starting again by applying this clear layer of water first, almost as if the first layer doesn't even exist, and it's very important that the first layer is completely dry when you do this, otherwise it will mess the first layer and probably create some pluming effect. But when it comes to the clouds, I think this is probably the most difficult part of this painting, so you also have the option to completely leave this out, but since the sand part will be very minimal, I do think that having a little bit more texture here in the sky created a nice balance for this painting. So I was just kind of testing out some little bit darker colors here. Painting clouds is definitely not easy, so I was struggling here as well, but we will add some white gouache paint details on top of everything, so if there are some harsh lines or parts that you don't really like, we can always cover those up later. But while I was letting these clouds dry, I went ahead and painted the area of the sand and also added the first layer for the water part. So same thing here, starting with a clear layer of water and then going over it with this brownish pink color. I tried to leave the center part of the painting here almost white, so it will look like a very highlighted area in the end, and then the corner of the sand is where I wanted the color to be the darkest. But then when it comes to the water part, we are not gonna go with the clear water layer anymore, and instead we are using the regular wet on dry method. So I wanted to leave these white stripes in between the blue tones, and I think it really helps to create the water-like surface. We'll add some darkness to this later, so this will just be the first blue layer, and all you need are some long horizontal stripes that are slowly getting lighter when we get closer to the beach part. But then let's jump back to the sky, and now it's time to add some white gouache paint here. So I started by coloring the sun completely white, and then we'll add some slow layers, mainly to the bottom parts of the clouds. I tried to leave the gouache paint looking a little bit more textured this time, so I was using a pretty dry brush here and didn't really blend the white paint that much. But there's really no right or wrong way to do this part, so you could always add more clouds or less of them. You could keep them a little bit more defined, or maybe you'd like the clouds to look a lot smoother. I think any decision is a possible one. But after that, it's time to just add some final layers and details to the painting. So I started by going over the water again, and this time we are using even darker blue tone than before and add these similar stripes over everything. I wanted the furthest horizon line to be the darkest in the water, and then the coast where we have these waves are definitely going to be a lot lighter and have a lot of white spaces between everything. I also added a few waves here that were more defined than the others, and then if you feel like you want to bring back some highlights, you can always go over a certain area with the white gouache paint. I think that's pretty much it for the painting. I ended up really liking this one, so I might even add it to my shop as an art print, and it will also be part of the digital version of this bullet journal theme that you can also get from there. I usually get the digital sets ready maybe a few days after the video goes live, so if it's not there yet, it will be very soon. But that's it for the painting, and now it's time for the sad part where we'll need to trim this to the correct size and also cut it in half. Doing this breaks my soul every time, but it's much easier to close the page if you actually cut the painting. So I wanted this to cover the whole space from top to bottom of this page, and then we'll just leave this small vertical space to the left that will have the opening for our secret Dutch door. I like to use double-sided tape whenever I attach these thicker, big paintings to my journal. And after this is done, we'll just cut out this small section off and write the August title next. I hope you're not tired of seeing these colorful paper decorations. I just love to use them so much because I can fully customize the colors to work with the themes. You're also able to download these sheets for free from my shop, and I'll leave all the links about that to the description as always. Anyway, I wanted to write the August title on this grayish blue background, so we will create a nice colorful border for the letters. You could of course do the same thing with colorful pens and draw the border that way, but using paper just creates very perfected and even end result. So I wanted to use this Dutch door space for the monthly calendar that I use to write any bigger deadlines and dates I need to remember. This is also when I check my future log that's in the beginning of my bullet journal and move any plans from there to the monthly calendar. So I went with this very simple calendar this time, and the colorful paper accent adds just a nice small touch in my opinion. Then I wanted to include a small notes section to the bottom of this page, which is something I often use to fill any empty spaces. These notes sections are so useful to have in my opinion, in case you have something in your mind that doesn't really fit anywhere else in your journal. But after that, we'll actually create one more painting here before we'll move on. There's only a small space for it on this spread, but I thought I'd make it a little bit bigger and use the rest of this painting later in the setup. So my idea here was to create some very light leaf pattern of sort. I was really inspired by some of those aesthetic plant shadow pictures, if you know what I mean. And I wanted to keep the colors in the same family here. So we are painting leaves with very non-leaf-like colors. Anyway, this time I definitely wanted to sketch these out a little bit more, so I started with some bigger banana leaves and just tried to place them somewhat evenly on this space. And after that I continued with some palm leaves. I think this sketch still looked pretty promising, but this was definitely one of those times where the coloring kinda destroyed everything. So I started with this very light grayish blue for the background, using the same wet on wet technique again. I tried to go around the banana leaves because I wanted to leave some white details on those. Then, while the background was still wet, I decided to add some darker leaves here, which would kind of look like some faraway plants or shadows even. I don't know how that turned out, but I guess the idea was still there. Then I started to add some of these same pinkish and brownish and light orange tones to the leaves, starting from the banana leaves because I wanted these to be lighter, and then make the palm leaves a little bit darker. I don't even know why I was struggling here so much. I felt like I wasn't finding colors I liked, and then everything started to quickly become a little bit muddy and messy. And yeah, at this point I was really not feeling this whole painting, but decided to just go on with it anyway and see how it would look on the page. I sometimes forget how in the beginning my bullet journal was really a place for me to experiment and practice painting, and I've always treated my journal more as a sketchbook that shows my journey and improvement rather than trying to keep everything very perfect by redoing the paintings I create. And while painting this one, I definitely felt like I want to redo it and change it to something else. And it made me realize that I've maybe forgotten that mindset a little bit. because making these videos and, especially creating the digital themes adds a layer of pressure to always come up with something that fits my personal standards. And whenever there is a painting that I don't like that much, I know I'll need to use more time to fix it in the digital process, because of course I don't want to sell anything that I'm not happy with. But yeah, so after this was done, I still wanted to add the painting to the page, so I started by trimming the edges quite a lot, because for some reason I made this way bigger than I needed. Then I actually made some last minute fixes to the painting after I had the correct size, because seeing this against all the other decorations made me realize that I definitely needed to darken some of the colors a little bit. And in the end, I mean, it doesn't look that bad. It's just very different from what I saw in my mind, which always seems to be the biggest issue. But anyway, I decided to just move on with it, and I finished this page with a little color palette in the top left, because I felt like that area still looked a little bit empty. But after that, we are finally done with the calendar page, and we can finally move on from this Dutch door setup. Next, we are going to set up a monthly planning spread, and we are going to start with this vertical title. So I used the same darker blue as the background, and I actually changed the color of the title later after I finished setting up the rest of the page. So I went over this black title with the same white pen we used earlier. And then there will be a bigger painting on the left side of this spread too, but I decided to first walk through the actual planning content. So I started with a small priority section, so I can list 4 of the most important things I'll need to get done this month. I think having a very small list like this helps you to put things in perspective, because I think that if you can cross off 4 important things in a month, that's already pretty good. It's sometimes so hard to focus on the bigger picture and what tasks are actually important when you kind of get lost into the sea of small daily tasks. But anyway, I followed this with a daily routine section. So here you could write out your ideal daily routine, and these numbers are the hours of the day. So this is a good place to think about when would you like to wake up, what times are for the most focused work or for breaks or easier tasks, and of course when would you like to start your evening wind down. I think it's very helpful to consider something like this every once in a while. I always feel like having this type of very clear plan helps me to be more motivated to improve my daily routine. Then we'll jump to the other page where I started with a small focus section. I don't know if focus is the best title for it, to be honest, but I'll use this space to write out my monthly plan and brainstorm a little bit about the things I feel like are the most important to focus on, and maybe what are the things that I shouldn't worry about yet. And then lastly, I made this grid box with this pretty pale peach colored brush pen that went perfectly with the colors this month, and here I'll have 2 separate sections to do a little feeling check-in. I often only end up writing about very progress or goals oriented stuff on these pages, so I think having a dedicated section to just catch up on your recent feelings is also very important. So this space is separated into 2 sections, where the first one is for the first day of the month, and then we can compare that with the last day of the month. But now that the actual planning content is out of the way, we'll create this long vertical painting here. And in this one, I mainly wanted to focus on some water glimmer effect, and again keep the colors very soft. I'll go through this one a little bit quicker because we're using the same techniques as we did in the first painting. So first we are starting with the sky and continuing right away to the water part. Here I mixed a little bit more blue to the colors to get this darker, almost grayish tone. And this painting actually took me only like 20 to 30 minutes. So it's a very quick one with only a few steps. But after the background layers were dry, you can again start to go over some of the areas to add deeper shadows. And I also added some white gouache paint again to create this glimmering appearance to the center part of the water. I finished this painting with some birds flying in the sky, and that's it for this super simple watercolor painting. Now we'll attach this to the page and quickly change the color of the title, and then we have this planning spread ready to go. This wasn't my favorite for some reason. I think it looked a little bit too light and boring somehow, but on the other hand, I know it will change quite a lot after I actually write some stuff here and fill all these empty spaces. But we still have 2 more spreads to go, and this next one will be a little bit simpler. So of course we need a weekly layout, and this month I'm actually gonna squeeze 2 weeks on this one spread, and then we have this tiny Dutch door thingy, and the last 2 weeks will go on this second spread. So I started by adding this washi tape border and then cutting this page following this edge on my ruler. It was a little bit difficult to cut, so it didn't end up looking as pretty as I thought. But anyway, I think it was like a small fun detail to add. But after that, let's start to walk through the weekly layout this time. So I decided to go back to the weekly task list approach. So instead of writing daily to-do lists, I'll just have this one longer list in the page that will include all the tasks that need to get done during this 1 week. However, I also do like to have a small space for each day, so in case there's a deadline or appointment or maybe a certain task that needs to be done on a certain day, you still have a little bit room to write that down. Then I rarely add paintings on my weekly sections unless they are like full Dutch door layouts, but I did have this one painting in mind that I wanted to do for this beach theme. And we're actually gonna use gouache paints for this one. I know some of you only use gouache paints and some of you only use watercolors, so I feel like I can never please everyone, but I hope that at least seeing this one painting created with gouache will give you the basic idea of how to create these beach and ocean illustrations. Anyway, in this painting we will have top-down view of some waves reaching the beach, and I started by kind of defining the colors for both of these corners first. After we've done that, we can kind of start mixing these 2 tones together and create this almost gradient effect through the waves, where the ones closer to the ocean will have more blue tones, and then the ones closer to the beach will be much lighter. I also added a hefty amount of white paint to this middle section especially, and in general I think it's a very good idea to leave a lot of these white spaces, at least in the beginning, and then you can slowly start to add some dots and lines to the waves. I think it would be really helpful to look through some pictures of waves so you can get a better idea of how much small texture you need to add, and where it usually looks the lightest and where are all the shadowy parts. So you can see that especially the front line of the wave usually has this white border. So I think that's a pretty easy way to really indicate where the new wave begins. But after this tiny painting was done, I went ahead and attached this to the journal too. I felt a little bit same way about this spread as the previous one, but I hope filling this with all my weekly plans will give some much needed contrast to this page as well. But now we have only one more spread to set up, and this will be our monthly reflection. I know we've already done a lot of painting in this setup, but we have one more to go. This one will be a little bit looser and really quick to go through. So my idea was to create this beach painting to the background of this spread, and then we'll add some boxes on top of it. This time I decided to paint directly into the journal, so it means that you'll need to let go of the quality a little bit whenever you do this. It's much harder to blend colors and they probably won't look quite as pigmented, so I was trying to just be pretty careful here and use as little water as I could get away with. We are using pretty much the same colors as we've been using this far. The only thing that was different here was this bigger palm tree that required some brown and green tones. But I still mixed quite a lot of brown with the green tones, so it created this very grayish muted green that I think went a little bit better with the rest of the colors here. I did mark down the placements for the boxes for myself beforehand so that I knew that those areas will be covered. But after we're done with the painting, it was time to write a title and add the boxes in place. So I used the same method to write the title as we did on the cover page, so that it would tie this whole theme together. And then we're using some different style boxes to get a little bit more interesting look to this spread. I actually think that this ended up being one of my favorite spreads in this whole setup. I really like how these boxes paired with the background painting. But anyway, I usually like to include questions here which help me review the past month and go over what happened. I also like to think about stuff that I was happy or proud about, and then things that I need to improve moving forward. And then as a small bonus question, I wrote this "what is truly important" question on the second page that I hope will help me to put things in perspective. But that's finally it for this August layout. Honestly, I'm already so looking forward to the fall season. Summer is the most difficult time of the year for me to come up with theme ideas for some reason, but I still really hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even got some new ideas from it. Anyway, if this was your first time here and you want to stay tuned for some future journaling and art videos, definitely consider subscribing. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and see you in my next one. Bye bye!